Nero. Nero wasn't just an emperor, he was Rome's walking disaster. 64 AD, a fire tears through the city, neighborhoods gone, thousands homeless, and while Rome panics, Nero, he watches from his palace, strumming his lyre as if the flames were his orchestra. Rome burned and its emperor played. But the fire was only the beginning. To deflect blame, he accuses the Christians, a small, vulnerable minority. Victims crucified, others fed to beasts, and some turned into human torches, lighting his gardens at night. For Nero, cruelty wasn't punishment, it was performance. And his excess didn't stop there. On the ruins of Rome, he builds a golden palace, marble halls, flowing fountains, a dining room that rotated so he could feast while the world spun around him. Even family wasn't safe. He ordered the deaths of his own mother and his wife, paranoid, rage-filled. Rome wanted a leader. Instead, it got a pyromaniac with a crown. Sometimes the greatest danger to an empire isn't an enemy at the gates, but the man sitting on the throne.
Caligula. If Nero burned Rome, Caligula tried to break its sanity. He ruled like a child with absolute power, except his games were bloodier than any gladiator fight. Executions, party entertainment, families forced to watch loved ones die, then invited to dinner as if nothing had happened. Senators humiliated, some ordered to run alongside his chariot like slaves. And yes, he even toyed with making his horse, Incitatus, a consul, because nothing says stable government like actual stables. Rumors of incest, paranoia, and sadism swirled through his palace. No one felt safe, not even his own family. His cruelty wasn't just vicious, it was absurd. To Rome, he wasn't a leader, he was a nightmare in a crown. Proof that madness on the throne is deadlier than any army. And if Caligula was chaos, the next king was pure terror.
Ivan the Terrible. Ivan IV, better known as Ivan the Terrible, didn't just rule Russia, he terrorized it. At first, he looked like a reformer, reorganizing government, strengthening the army, even building St. Basil's Cathedral. But once paranoia sank its claws in, his reign turned into one of history's bloodiest nightmares. He created the Oprichniki, a black-clad secret police force, a kingdom of executioners. They stormed towns with dogs' heads tied to their saddles, symbols of their hunger to tear apart traitors. Villages burned to the ground, nobles tortured for sport, and the massacre of Novgorod, tens of thousands dead, left frozen in the streets. Ivan himself became fury incarnate. His rage is so violent, one outburst ended with him striking his own son to death, killing the heir who could have secured his dynasty. For Ivan, cruelty wasn't the cost of power, it was the power. Fear was his government, and terror his policy. Under his reign, Russia didn't feel like a kingdom, it felt like a prison camp, built on fire and screams. But if Ivan ruled through paranoia, the next king ruled through ego, and the trail of blood he left behind was just as unforgettable.
Henry VIII. Henry VIII wasn't remembered for leading armies or writing laws. He's remembered for turning marriage into a death sentence. The Tudor King of England treated wives like disposable pawns, marrying 6 times and discarding them in ways that made his personal life a national horror show. When Catherine of Aragon couldn't give him a male heir, he tore England away from the Catholic Church just to divorce her. Anne Boleyn? Even worse. Once celebrated as queen, she was executed on charges of treason and adultery, accusations historians still debate as pure fabrication. His third wife, Jane Seymour, died in childbirth. Henry quickly remarried. Anne of Cleves, humiliated and discarded after he called her the Flanders mare. Catherine Hallward, barely a teenager, beheaded for infidelity. By the time he settled with Catherine Parr, she was more caretaker than queen, nursing an aging, obese tyrant, rotting with infected wounds and paranoia. Henry's ego was his true crown. He reshaped religion, bankrupted nobles, and filled graveyards with wives, advisors, even friends. Under Henry, the throne of England wasn't power. It was a guillotine disguised as royal furniture.
Charles IX. Charles IX didn't just rule France, he drowned it in blood.
1572, his court planned one of the most infamous massacres in European history, the slaughter of French Protestants, the Huguenots. It began during what should have been a celebration, the wedding of his sister, Margaret, to a Protestant noble. A marriage meant to unite two faiths instead became the trapdoor to hell. In the dead of night, Catholic forces struck first, doors kicked down, families dragged into the streets. The Seine River ran red with corpses. Charles himself was said to watch from the Louvre, even firing a musket from his palace window at fleeing victims. What started as a royal order spiraled into weeks of uncontrolled carnage. The violence spread across France, tens of thousands slaughtered simply for their faith. Charles IX was barely in his 20s, a king dominated by the iron will of his mother, Catherine de' Medici. But excuses don't erase consequences. His reign became a symbol of betrayal, fanaticism, and state-sanctioned murder. France was left scarred. And Charles himself? Dead young, coughing blood, as if history itself was eager to silence him.
Leopold II of Belgium. Leopold II of Belgium wore the mask of a civilizing king, but behind it lurked one of history's greatest monsters. Late 19th century, he claimed a Congo Free State as his personal property, not for Belgium, for himself. What followed was a reign of terror that turned an entire region into a private slaughterhouse. Villages forced to harvest rubber under impossible quotas. Fail, and punishment came swiftly. Men executed. Women taken as hostages. Children mutilated to send a message. Soldiers were ordered to cut off hands to prove they hadn't wasted bullets. Piles of severed limbs became the currency of Leopold's empire. Estimates say as many as 10 million Congolese died through starvation, disease, murder, and exhaustion. And yet, in Europe, Leopold styled himself a philanthropist. He built monuments, parks, boulevards, all funded by the blood of a continent. His Congo was not a colony. It was a kingdom of corpses, ruled by greed disguised as progress. Even today, his statues are defaced, toppled, condemned. Because Leopold's legacy is not civilization, it's genocide with a crown.
Herod the Great. Herod the Great built temples, fortresses, cities across Judea, but history remembers him less as an architect and more as a tyrant drenched in paranoia. His reign, grandeur on the outside, bloodshed within. Obsessed with securing his throne, he executed rivals, nobles, even members of his own family, wives, sons, in-laws, all eliminated the moment he suspected betrayal. But it's the biblical tale that sealed his infamy. According to the Gospel of Matthew, when he heard of a prophecy about a newborn king of the Jews, Herod ordered the massacre of the innocents, the slaughter of Bethlehem's infants. Legend or fact, the story captured the essence of his rule. Fear turned into mass murder. Even Roman historians, not known for softness, recoiled at his cruelty. Augustus himself reportedly joked, "It's safer to be Herod's pig than his son." A brutal quip underlining how disposable family became under his paranoia. Yes, Herod built wonders that still stand today, but no monument could outshine his reputation. For Judea, his throne wasn't a crown of glory, it was a shadow of terror. And if Herod's cruelty echoed through scripture, the next king made cruelty his brand.
Vlad III of Wallachia, better known as Vlad the Impaler, turned cruelty into legend. To his people, he was both protector and monster. To his enemies, pure nightmare fuel. His favorite method of execution? Impalement, a slow, agonizing death, victims skewered on long wooden stakes, left to die over hours, sometimes days. Forests of corpses lined the roads into his kingdom, a grotesque warning sign, written in blood and screams. Ottoman envoys once refused to remove their turbans in his court. Vlad's response? He nailed the turbans to their skulls. Entire villages wiped out to secure his rule. Estimates of his victims? Tens of thousands. To invaders, Wallachia wasn't a country, it was a graveyard with walls. But his brutality fueled his legend. Centuries later, his blood-soaked name inspired the myth of Count Dracula. History blurred him into folklore, but the truth was darker than fiction. Vlad didn't need fangs. He didn't need a castle in Transylvania. He had something far more terrifying: the throne, the power, and the will to use them without mercy.
8 kings, 8 nightmares, 8 thrones that turned into instruments of terror. History crowned them kings, but their power was nothing without cruelty. If you thought kings were terrifying, wait until you see the presidents who turned democracy into dictatorship. That's coming next. If you enjoyed this, stick around for the next one. And hey, subscribing wouldn't hurt.